It's good. No one person holds all truth. So, but we can do this in a civil way, respect the facts, and not question the motives of those with whom we disagree. And Barbara, thank you for your patience in hearing me out. Let's get to some the really fun part of the questions. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman. Before we begin the Q&A, I just wanted to inform our audience of how we're going to do this, just sort of the ground rules of how we'll proceed from this point. Each audience member should have received an index card to write their question. So if you'd like to ask a question and you don't have a card, please raise your hand and a member of staff will give you the card. But please make sure that it's legible. Please print. There's some script writing, including my own, that I can't decipher, so I really would appreciate a printed question. And you're invited to ask one question during the night. I will receive your questions and will sort through them to prevent the same question from being asked twice. And I will randomly select questions for the Congressman to answer, and we'll repeat that process up until 8 p.m., and then the Congressman may opt at that point to expand, depending on how we're going. Congressman, I have already sorted through a number of questions relating to Lincoln housing. It is a popular topic tonight. So many of our military families have complained to News Channel 3 about this issue, and I'm going to read through several questions regarding this, and hopefully you can get to them. There are a stack. So there are our Lincoln people. Can you stand and be recognized so we know how many of you are here to address that issue? These are our Lincoln families. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Here's the questions. You may be seated. There are several layers. You stated in your letter to Portsmouth Naval Hospital, there is an obvious link between chronic illnesses occurring in the residents occupying Lincoln houses. However, no comprehensive survey has been conducted, and Portsmouth Naval Hospital is not tracking these families to make a connection. How can we ensure our service members and their families are receiving specialized care in response to these toxic living conditions?
Thank you for the question. And I'm just so sorry for what the families have experienced. For those of you who may not be really up to speed, let me just in a very concise way explain what's happened. Many years ago, the United States military decided it could lower cost and improve quality, those were the two objectives, by going out into the private sector and having what were historically military-owned and maintained homes transferred over to a private company, which would then maintain the homes. And it has worked with, I think, reasonably good success across the country, reasonably so. That was not the case in Hampton Roads. In certain particular neighborhoods, the homes themselves are old. Some of these homes are 50 years old. But that is no excuse for the conditions that I personally observed when I went through the homes with some of the families who were here. And it was indisputable. You see black mold up in the ducts, and you see tile, if you lift it up from the bathroom, just covered in black mold. Now, I'm not an environmental scientist, but I know, and here's the acid test that I shared with the Navy and my staff, and also the families. I said, the question to me is, just the average, what's the average person to do? I said this: I will not have our families in any home that I wouldn't personally stay in, because of basically the condition of these homes. If I was uncomfortable with it, then look, we don't want our families in these homes. Now, we have had a tremendous amount of our own office's effort directed at this particular issue. We've been to the homes. Bree Kingsbury, our military outreach coordinator and director, has been out and has been a good, I think, a fine liaison with the families. Thank you. They're clapping. Bree's awesome. Bree is awesome. I can see her tonight where she is. We'll make sure we let her. Hey, Bree is here. Thank you, Bree. She's the wife of a hard-charging naval officer herself. Okay, so we've had a full court press on this. And listen, when a member of Congress, quite frankly, on House Armed Services starts barking on a matter like this, they start listening. A two-star admiral We had his full attention. We've met many times, and I've met with the senior leaders of the Portsmouth Medical Center. Now, I can say to the families here tonight that I am convinced that the senior leadership of the Portsmouth Medical Center, they are desiring to meet with the families and will listen, will do testing to see any mold sensitivity. And I have inquired about this, have we not, Bree, on tracking this to see if there's a connection between the two. In terms of some massive, comprehensive, overriding study, I'm not sure that's where we need to be, but every individual family that needs attention, I'm just committed to making sure that they get attention. And if for any reason you don't feel like that's the case, we'll stay afterwards and we'll circle right back around and we'll just ride back over to Portsmouth Medical Center. But it's my role and my privilege to be the strongest advocate for our men and women in uniform and our families.
Well, Congressman, there are several questions, several layers. And
okay.
There are families who are here saying that, then why is it, after your efforts and the two-star admiral, and we've been watching the layers of news coverage and your activity specifically, why is Lincoln continuing to tell people they have no conclusive proof that there's mold? That's one. Also, what's being done to inform families that are being moved into some of these facilities where mold has been detected into some of the same problem areas? And homes that have so-called been remediated by military housing, how do we guarantee that they're safe?
Well, I think the key is there observable mold? I mean, if there's observable mold in any home, that in and of itself is reason for a full stop. Now, of course, this assumes, and our families are doing this, but just regular cleaning and all that. I'm talking about the stuff that is clearly a defective product that's a result of water intrusion. That's what happens. Water gets into the walls. It has seeped in through the ceilings of some of these homes and gotten into the walls, and that's where you get the really rough stuff. They can be tested. I know there's a rigorous testing program out there, and again, I would, just because of the complexity of the issue, I would think that if there are any individual problems remaining, that we just go on a case-by-case basis. I think that, in fact, I'm certain that the Navy has gotten all the way from 4-star. Admiral Harvey and I talked about this yesterday, our local 4-star. I mean, it really doesn't get any higher than that. I can go to Secretary Mavis, he'd take the call, but I'm convinced we have enough horsepower here locally to get it done. So if there are any remaining issues on a particular home, please let us know, and we'll circle back around.
All right, Congressman, the second most popular questions surround this very space that we occupy tonight, and that's Fort Monroe. I'm going to try to go through a few of them.
Okay.
Martha Walker asks, how will we and how can we take care of this natural and cultural resource of Fort Monroe? Scott says, first, thank you for your efforts on behalf of Fort Monroe, but second, there is a divided national monument split by 100 acres called the Quarry Quarter. Will you support keeping it as an open space for eventual inclusion in the national monument? And I guess they're asking about the possibility that could it be divided into private land to be developed into something other than a national park.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go back to the slide just for a second? It might be helpful for just a little bit. I don't know that we'll get to, here we go. It wasn't too long after we celebrated the signing by the President making this a national monument that I started receiving calls saying, all is not well, which really surprised me, and to be very candid with you here tonight, it disappointed me. There were a number of agreements that were substantive in nature that had not yet been fully negotiated between the Army and the city and the Fort Monroe Authority. And I just thought, well, I'm a little bit surprised why that wouldn't work out. But anyway, just set that aside for a moment. It's a very complex agreement, and I can somewhat understand that. We, at the request of both the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Fort Monroe Authority, because things had gotten bogged down with the Army. We called a meeting, and I went over there along with Esmel Meeks, who's here with me today, and some others. We went over to the Pentagon and met with Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Assistant Secretary Hammock. And I was delighted to meet her because when we sat down, and it was a long boardroom, a long table, and there were lots of people standing, lots of people sitting, and I got to make some opening remarks and just kind of get things going. And I said, look, the President wants to get this done, the Governor wants to get this done, the citizens of Hampton want to get this done. Listen, we are all Americans. Let's not forget this. I mean, because it was kind of, the position seemed to be hardening a bit. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, we're all Americans here. Let's do what's right and let's navigate through this. And though I don't think we have a final resolution right now, I left there so encouraged because Secretary Hampton was saying, well, can't we just move forward on this? Can't we move forward on this? Why don't we just do this? I want y'all to do this. I'm telling you, because it was even a question as to whether OPSAIL was going to be able to be used here before. And she didn't know what that was. And I said, Secretary Hammock, I said, if OPSAIL is not going to be able to navigate and operate right here in Fort Monroe, I said, you will see me on the House floor making a big deal out of this. Well, now look, I've got to use what tools I have in my toolkit. And I don't like to talk like that, but she was... It was all very amicable. I don't want to make you feel like, I mean, we can ratchet it up if we have to, but it was very amicable. She was very a delight to work with. And I left there just thinking, that meeting went as well as it could possibly have gone. I really believe that we're going to get this done. So these issues that have been outlined in this question, they're quite complex, but I do believe that the number one priority, and it's really, frankly, it's for the citizens of Hampton. Now, I'll listen and I think this is a case where I really need to understand the collective wisdom and the will of the good people of Hampton. So, as we navigate through all this, but overwhelmingly, what's got to happen, the whole point of this is to preserve the historic nature of the facility, so that people come from generations from now and understand what took place here from a historical standpoint that really guided our country into a much better place. As difficult as it was at that moment in the Civil War, this was a pivot, a real turning point when General Butler declared contraband and the whole thing. So that's a long way of saying, Barbara, that I want to listen to the citizens, and we can circle back around and have another meeting on that if you'd like.
That may cover most of the questions regarding this issue, but David Dietrich takes it a little further. He believes that the U.S. Constitution has been violated in this process. So why do you...
He has my attention, because I took an oath to defend the Constitution. Help me.
He basically outlines from Article 1, Section 8 to Amendments 1, 4, 5, and 6 that there's a so-called trespass bill that should apply.
Interesting. Of course, I've reread, and regularly read the Constitution. Nothing triggered inside of me a sense that in any way that we had violated the Constitution. I would be just really grateful if you would please, it's David, correct? David, if you would kindly, let me, okay, sir, thank you for the question. And why don't we do this, Beth? I'm going to actually make you the point of contact, please. And if you would just express your concern, and I'll make sure that I respond to you directly on that. Thank you.
All right, Congressman, next from Russell DeYoung. You are on the House Science Committee. What should the federal government do to minimize the effects of global climate change, especially effect of the sea level rise here in Hampton Roads?
Well, the fact that the world is warming is not undisputed. These are the facts. Now, the direct link between man's activities and global warming, I think there's linkage. I do. The degree to which there is linkage and the cause and effect of all this, I think that still good and reasonable people can disagree. I think we need to take reasonable steps, both through not only the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, but just on the House floor generally. and at every opportunity to reduce carbon emissions. I think this is a wise policy. I do think that it's clear that on occasion the administration and others have gone too far too fast. And so often when I find folks who they'll maybe claim a little bit more of a higher ground from an environmental standpoint, they'll see themselves as caring more about the environment. What I'd say is, respectfully, you may care as much, but I don't concede that you care more, about our environment, for example. I might want to take, say, maybe 10 to 15 years to get to a certain point, and someone might say, I want to get there in 5. Well, the good news is we're trying to go to the same place. The negotiations and discussions then have to do with how quickly do we get there. So with respect to carbon emissions, I think the administration has gone too far and too fast. Overwhelmingly, you know where these carbon emissions are coming from, is China. They're not too worried about clean coal. And they're building them just like that. The whole countryside of China is just going up in smokestacks. So I think part of it too is engaging our the international community in this as well.
All right, Congressman, the next question comes from Brad Bloom. The average person contributes to their nation through taxes on income. Military, whether short or long service, contributes sweat, passionate service, and sometimes their blood and lives. Why are our pay, benefits, and retirement subject to tax? We, sir, have paid.
Well, let me first acknowledge the sacrifice of blood and treasure. The Hampton Roads community has, because of the reason I stated earlier, the fact that we have the highest concentration of men and women in uniform, there's a disproportionate burden on our families here. There's often this talk about the 1% and the 99%. There is indeed, you can maybe go on the economic part of this model, but there's certainly, when it comes to our military, there is less than the 1% of Americans who are defending the other 99. I know we have, and I believe I say this with their permission, they're dear friends of mine, we have 2 Gold Star families in the audience tonight. 2 Gold Star dads, 2 different families. Heavy, heavy burden. And we're grateful for your sacrifice, and we do not forget our Gold Star families. With respect to taxation, I hold the view that it's good and proper for all Americans, even those who serve in our military, to make some contribution. I think that now we need to honor the commitments that are made to our troops. I've made that clear, and we're failing our troops right now with respect to TRICARE and these re-enlistment boards. We need to look at that as well, and then at some point that'll probably come up with our Navy families and Air Force and all others, but particularly Navy right now. But I don't see it as, I just hold the view that it's proper. Now, you make sure that you compensate them so that the after-tax is a fair and competitive and properly rewards these families for this incredible job they do. I don't know of another job that takes you into harm's way so often. And we've had, with these deployments, some of our families we've talked to 10, 12 deployments. And without being too specific, families like Breeze, the deployments are almost too numerous to count. So we need to compensate them fairly, and we need to honor the commitments that we made to them. But I think taxing them at a normal rate with other Americans, I think that's a good thing. I think it's proper.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. From Elizabeth Wagner, the HUB Zone Protection Act passed the Senate. It has over 60 bipartisan co-sponsors in the House, a half a dozen from North Carolina, several more from Maryland and Virginia, to include 1st District Congressman Whitman and 3rd District Congressman Scott. The Eastern Shore needs your attention. Why aren't you sponsoring this act?
Fair question. I I really don't know much about that bill. Be candid with you. We could probably, folks could queue up and ask me about any number of bills, and I'd have to say, I've got to get back to you on that. I mean, it's so, I'd love for you to, and in fact, this is a sincere and warm and genuine invitation to each and every one of you to come visit us in Washington. I love, and Beth is our scheduler, she'll tell you that if there's some folks who want to come by and talk to me about an advocacy issue, if they're from the district, I get excited because I think, oh, reinforcements from home. Whether folks agree or not with me, I just love seeing folks. If somebody says, I'm from Hampton, I'm from Norfolk, I'm from Virginia Beach, I'm from the Eastern Shore, I'm like, great, come on in. So we'd love to have you come up and visit us. But this particular bill, and if we may ask, who was the person who asked the question? I didn't.
Elizabeth.
Oh, can you help us, Elizabeth? What is that bill about? What does it do?